and welcome to all those, of course, watching us live on Businessworld's digital platforms and also on NewsX. And hello to all of you who are present here at the Gurugram venue for this edition of IBLF. I was privileged to be part of the Delhi edition as well. That was a roaring success, and I'm sure that today is no different. Of course, it's a tough job to follow S.V. Nathan's one-on-one there. We could have just listened to you all day, sir. If you want more of those stories, you know where to get them. You've got to pick up his book, The Heart of Work. But we're going to be talking a bit about that. But I want to just start out by asking you, because it's a very interesting title, The Heart of Work. You know, business, work, normally you don't connect that with heart. So how did you think of the title, The Heart of Work?
Well, I must credit. I don't think I thought of this thing about the heart of work. I must credit a gentleman who is sitting somewhere in the audience. His name is Sachin Sharma. Can you please stand up, please? Stand up, stand up. That's my editor. So he and I had long conversations. And then we finally came up, because he said that in all what you have written of the several stories, this whole thing was to do with the heart. And there's a lot about work. So can we bring this together? And that's how we finally arrived at that. But I must thank Sachin for it.
Okay. Well, so can I safely say then, you know, as they say, the heart is associated with romance as well. The king of romance is Shah Rukh Khan. So are you the Shah Rukh Khan of the work industry, the business space?
First, I don't have his looks. Second, I don't have his panache. But in our own worlds, I can tell you this, each one of us sitting in this room is either a Shah Rukh Khan, or pick your favorite heroine and say, I'm going to be this or that. Because to us, our children think that we are the best. Yeah, the best mother, the best father. So we are Shah Rukh Khans in our own worlds.
But Mr. Nathan, you know, the fact is that we're talking about AI, you know, across the country. But what about EI, emotional intelligence? Have we forgotten that? And perhaps you can demonstrate that through an example, a story as well.
Okay. I do think that emotional intelligence is, to say it's important is very different. But what it takes is, in the moment, can you stay with what is happening rather than being judgmental? So several years ago, and this is a story that has been shared, and so I will talk about a boss of mine. So this boss of mine, on a Saturday afternoon, he was interviewing somebody. And he's very particular about the way the person dresses. So he's got to be, and even the tie has got to be a correct knot, the way that you do it. And he's got to have shining shoes, no different, etc., etc. The meeting was at 3 o'clock, and I was coordinating this whole thing. And at 3 o'clock sharp in the afternoon, I found a person who had come to the office in a dhoti. And he had a t-shirt. His hair was disheveled. And I had no ways of going and convincing my boss that there is somebody you got to meet at 3. And when I had inquired with that gentleman, he said, yes, it is I. I said, pardon me. And I was absolutely apologetic. My boss didn't even bother. He got the person inside the room and he says, Nathan, do me the courtesy of sitting in the room. So that was an interview which started. I thought it's going to be over in 20 minutes. It lasted an hour and a half. The organization finally found its marketing head. An outstanding gentleman. Outstanding. The interview was over. The person was about to leave. My boss had not asked a single question about his attire. Just when the person was reaching the door, he turned around and he says, Mr. So-and-so, would you not care to ask me why I'm dressed this way, or the lack of it? He said, I'm sure you would have good reasons, but do tell me. He says, I lost my mother this morning. And I had made a commitment to you that I would be here at 3. I'm coming straight from the funeral, and you must therefore pardon me for the way I'm attired. In that moment, I understood what is emotional intelligence all about. My boss never referred to why this person was dressed this way, because obviously he saw something that I did not see. So part of intelligence is observing and then staying in the moment. And as soon as that happened, I could have gone and hugged that gentleman there. Anyways, I think it's very, very important. There are several stories. Even as I'm speaking to you, I'm sure you would have your own stories of the times that you have either been emotionally intelligent or you would have seen evidence of that.
One can't help but also reminisce just recently about Prime Minister Modi as well. The day that Prime Minister Narendra Modi lost his mother, she was in hospital. It seemed that her health was somewhat stabilizing. So he had come back to Delhi, and there was that program in West Bengal, and it happened early in the morning. Obviously, the Prime Minister couldn't go to West Bengal, but he made sure that the work carried on because the Vande Bharat train was meant for the people. You know how difficult it is getting a date from the PMO, for the Prime Minister's program. So it perhaps would have been another month that the people would have had to wait for the Vande Bharat Express to be, flagged off, or some of those other development projects. And he also carried on with his Kartavya Path for the day. So how does one, balance emotions and work? How does one balance this at the workplace? Because these are not often topics that are addressed, in the cutthroat corporate environment. And it's actually quite appropriate that we're in Gurugram, right next to the cyber hub and the cyber city, and where the top companies of the world are headquartered.
I think we all keep learning. Our previous speakers have spoken about this. And when Shiv was speaking about just the way we learn, people learn through observing others. People learn through books. People learn in different ways. I'll give you an example. Several years ago, when again I was a very young officer in an organization, very young officer. And I thought that they're going to give me a very big job. And the job that they gave me was to look after cafeteria and transport. Now, cafeteria and transport to the person who has come out of a top B school, I was feeling really lousy. Went up to my boss and I said, seriously, this is what I'm supposed to do? He says, you will learn a lot, do it. Anyways, first day on the job, somebody came and asked me for a car. In those days, you didn't have a Ola, Uber, any of these tourists. You had just 4 cars. 3 of them were in the garage. And 1 car, unfortunately, was supposed to be a reserve for the ambulance, should in case the ambulance breaks down. I didn't have a car. This man went and complained to my boss. Not just my boss, my super boss. My super boss was the general manager of the place. He called me, and then he was really shouting at me. I tried to explain to him, but maybe he got up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe he didn't understand emotional intelligence himself. I couldn't tell him that. He was very upset with me. And just when I thought I was going to lose my job, suddenly somebody runs into the room, stands in front of me, between me and the general manager, looks at me and he says, Nathan, please leave the room. He looks at the general manager and says, the young man is responsible, but I am accountable. I am accountable. You can hold me accountable. He was my administration manager, a man that I will never forget, Captain Nautiyal. Why can I not forget Captain Nautiyal? Because in the moment he was teaching me the basic foundation, the principle of leadership, standing up for your people. Stand up. So these are not taught. You get to portals of knowledge and wisdom in schools. And what they would do is pontificate that you should do this. These are the structures and Maslow's theory of hierarchy and of needs and so on. But nobody teaches you this. You learn this on the job. And as I'm speaking to you again, there are many such stories in your own lives. So that's all that I do. That I try to look at the experiences that I've had or the people that I've either seen as great leaders, and I have compiled them into a nice book. It doesn't take more than 4 to 5 minutes reading any story. So I was fighting a battle with WhatsApp because everything is very visual these days. So I said, I've got to write something which does not take more than 4 to 5 minute read. You can skim through it, but it stays on your mind at a subliminal level.
You know, the book also starts off with a very interesting preface, which is also a story in itself. Tell us about that story. Because I believe Mr. Nathan was asked, "Where's your book?" And he was like, "Okay, was I meant to write one?" Tell us about that a little.
Oh, well, I was asked to write a book, and I was saying, do I really have to write one? Today, in our midst, there's a gentleman out here called Prakash Iyer. Prakash is an outstanding author. He's a great leader. He's the CEO of Kimberly-Clark, a wonderful gentleman. And I was getting my book autographed by him. He says, waiting for your second. So, what really happens is, there's a seeding that happens at a below the layer, at a subliminal level. People tell you things. And just for that, how are we motivated? We are motivated because somebody does something, somebody tells you something, and then it stays with you. So, this friend of mine said, "Where is your book?" And you also heard Shiv speak about, hey, committed is what I need. I don't need loyalty. And somehow all these things came together, and I said, I will write this book, and I will write this by the end of the year. I don't care whether I have to stay up every night to do this. And I got that whole thing done.
But let me, ask you a direct question, because you talk in your book about values, about ethics, about integrity, about empathy. But who succeeds in the corporate world? One who has these traits or who throws them out of the window?
Ultimately, when you leave your kursi and you get onto the road, when you're in front of a running train, the train doesn't care whether you're the CEO of the place or what. Everybody, it's a great level at the negative end. At the positive end, people will always remember you for how you made them feel. And I didn't say this. Angela said this years ago. The person who will win is the person who wins hearts. People will be long remembered. There are very successful CEOs, very successful professionals, but the people who normally will are the people who have a tug at the heart. Those are the people who will win. And I truly believe in that.
You talk about happiness in the book as well. Let me ask a personal question then. What gives S.V. Nathan happiness in real life?
My happiness is to see a plant grow. My happiness is to see a flower bloom. My happiness is anybody who is on my team, if they do well in their lives, that gives me the greatest joy. And I will tell you a story. So it so happened that I was going to the washroom. There was a woman who was coming in from the other side, and she was doing something like this. I said, let me just call her Sunita. So I said, hey, Sunita, is everything okay with you? She says, yeah. I said, hey, tell you what, hold on for a couple of minutes and I will see you in my office. So she came to my office and she says, today is my last working day. I said, who says so? And why? She says, because I was asked to leave. Who asked you to do this? My manager. So I said, you do nothing of that sort. Just go back to your desk. Life will be good. So she went back and then I called the manager. And I said, hey, listen, what happened? She said, sir, please don't tell me that you've asked her to stay. I said, I tell you what, I have asked her to stay. Did I make a mistake? She said, sir, this year has been a horrible year for her. She has not been a performer. I think you just got to let her go. And I said, I don't know, maybe you should give her a chance. Let me speak to her. I called back Sunita. I said, tell me, was everything okay for you for this year? And she says, sir, my mother was suffering from cancer. Most of the time I was in the hospital. I just couldn't do justice to my job. And I admit I was not a great performer. I said, this organization can bear this. So don't worry. You know what? This will give you another chance. Just go back to your desk. Life is good. Let's start all over again. The following year, there's always something that happens. We all sit down and evaluate the performance of people. And performance evaluation. Can you guess who was on the top? Sunita. Sunita was on top. She came back almost with a vengeance. And I just think it's not about me. It's about Sunita. Because all of us are given opportunities. People are given a second chance. What do we do with the second chance? Life is a lot about these values. Can you care? Can you care to care? That's what I'll leave you with.
No, that's very, very important words. And I think COVID and lockdown, taught us all of that as well, to learn to care for others, and also empathy, the importance of it, and how important mental health also is, for individuals. But, just talking about now, you've given us some amazing lessons through this session, and it's all there in the book. So you certainly know how you can be coached to success, or, imbibe all of this. But how important then is coaching, is training? Because these are great life lessons that you're telling us, but are our B schools, our colleges, our schools equipping one, coaching one, training? You have a chapter on coaching and training as well in the book. Are we coaching our young generation enough with these skills?
I have a view about coaching. I think most of what coaching does is, first of all, coaching is important. All of us needs a coach. And it does not have to be a formal coach. The best feedback you can get from your brother, your sibling, your sister, your mother, father, everybody around can give you, provided you're open to this. The best coach I had in my life was a person who used to be, he was a free-floating coach, an athletics coach. And I was in my 10th standard, and I wanted to be a runner. So I went up to this coach in a large corporation playground. I asked him, Coach, I want to. So he says, okay. So what do you want to do? I said, I want to represent my school. So he said, okay, run and show me. So I went round, and he says, what do you want to do? I want to be a sprinter. Why did I want to be a sprinter? I said, because my father was a great sprinter. So he says, don't compare. But if you want to be a sprinter, start. So on your mark, get set, go. It took me 14 and a half seconds to finish a 100-meter race. Now, just to put that in perspective, it is a lousy run. Lousy. He looked at me and he said something like, "Eena chali." So I said, what do I do? He says, you can't be on this ground, get out. I came back home, I was weeping. My mother looked at me and says, what happened? Says, Amma, I went to the ground, and this coach says, you're lousy, you can't run. So he says, you asked him the wrong question. You ask him the question, what are you good at? I said, okay. Next day went up, then went all the way to the coach, and as is our custom, Charan Sparsh. And he looked at me, beta aa gaya? So I said, हाँ साहब. So he said, अब क्या है? So I told him something to the effect that, look, I want to be back, I want to do this. So he says, let's do this. You take a round of the 400-meter track and don't stop till I tell you. So I started to run 400 meters, 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 5. After God knows how many rounds, he stopped. And he called me and he says, you cannot be a sprinter, but you will be a long distance runner. Middle and long distance will be your. And fast forward, many things happened. It did turn out that I became a good middle long distance runner. But that lesson stayed with me. The questions that we ask people is, put them on a track, make them run that, and say you're not good in this, instead of asking and finding the question, the answer to the question is, what is the person really good at? We hire people, we bring people on board, but that's not what their passion is about. We put them on jobs that they don't like, or they're not good at. I took on a person who was outstanding in something, but then failed miserably in other places. The question was, his boss was a very nice guy. He asked him, Beta, what are you really good at? And he says, I love numbers. This is what I'd like to do. So then he got shifted. Not everybody is able to do that. Back to the question, we all need outstanding, not coaches and mentors, but people who are able to understand the strengths of others. We succeed because people recognize our strengths. So that's what I would
Is there another message in your story as well? Ki lambe race ka ghoda bano. Don't be a short-term sprinter.
Well, I don't put words in your mouth, but you said it.
Okay. Also about the young generation now, because I'm sure you're observing them and you've been observing them over the years. Do you see a change in attitude, behavior? What are the trends in the young generation of today? Obviously, as a partner and chief talent officer of Deloitte India, you're responsible for the new talent and inculcating, of course, the talent that is in your firm. What are the trends you've observed in the young generation, the entrance into the job market?
First of all, the younger generations are hugely talented. They are far more cleverer than many of us sitting in this room. They are outstanding people. I think many of them could be just losing a sense of direction. And it's our role to make sure that we play to their strengths. Pretty much the point that I spoke to you about. I think there is a lot that we can learn from the younger generation. For example, I have something called reverse mentoring. So I have a coach. That coach is all of 24 years. So I learn a lot about technology from him and then go and tell my kids that this is what you can do, this is what you can do. And my children think I'm a very smart guy. And they'll tell each other, Dad is not all that dumb as we think him to be. The power really lies in a conversation. So do we have the kind of conversation with our youngsters? Because they are a bundle of talent. Today, India, 1/3 of India's GDP lies in the future of these people who are entrepreneurs. 1/3 of this is in MSMEs. That 1/3 will just move dramatically because this is in the hands of very young people. We can learn a lot from our young people. All we need to do is suspend judgment. Suspend judgment. Because we say, you must read. Hey, give them some content that they want to read. Don't lump them and say, you should do this. The words of the shoulds and the oughts and the must give way to opportunities where people will come back and say, yes, I would like to do that. So the only advice that I give myself is keep a very large ear open and just keep an open mind and a willing heart.
Okay. But I'm sure there are some prospective entrants as well for Deloitte India, and also that applies to the other firms in the corporate sphere as well. How do they crack that interview? What are one or two tips that you can give them?
Tips for cracking a Deloitte interview, very simple, be yourself. If you try to ape somebody else that you're not, you will fail miserably. We recognize that if you're yourself, we recognize people for who you are. We recognize you. That's it. We need you.
Can we have a story of an interesting interview as well?
Okay. So, years ago, there was this guy who I wanted a stenographer. I don't know whether some of us in the audience will know a stenographer, the person who can take shorthand and all that. That's a tribe which has vanished. I wanted a stenographer because I want to sit in an office, my feet on the table, and then tell this person, dictate this note and all this. You can never find stenographers. They searched high and low. They got me 3 people. Finally, one got shortlisted. This guy, I was told by everybody, he is an ugly looking man. You may not want him on your team. So I said, seriously? And actually, they said, sir, you don't want to interview this guy. I said, he is the first person I want to interview. Got him over. We had a chat. In the first 20 minutes, I knew that he was the person. And Well, into the interview, I asked him a question. I said, what did you do in your undergrad? So he said, I did BSc Physics. Percentage, 86. 86% in BSc Physics. That guy was a near genius sitting in front of me as a stenographer. I asked him why. And he says, because I could not afford, I had to sustain a family of my parents, etc., etc. So I said, okay, I'm going to fire you in 18 months. You're hired, fire you in 18 months. He said, what will I do? He says, don't worry, we'll give you something else to do. 10 years later, the same person came to my house and gave me a letter. And he said, sir, you must pardon me, I'm leaving Deloitte. And I said, no, you should not be leaving Deloitte. So he said, take a look at the letter. Open the letter, it says, Dear Nagraj, we are pleased to appoint you as a general manager operations in our, etc., etc. That was what it read. It said. Then I hugged him and I said, of course, the world needs you. What it told me was that there is talent in each and every person. It just needs to find expression. And there are many people who are able to discover the talent. Nagaraj is very much around, and he's an outstanding general manager of human resources.
Fantastic. Well, as I said earlier, we can do this all day. We can listen to S.V. Nathan, so interesting, so charismatic. And this was just a trailer. If you want puri picture, as they say, you've got to read the book, The Heart of Work. It's out there. So pick up a copy and enjoy these stories all day through the year. Yes, Dr. Batra.
Mr. Nathan, I do know you I met you for the first time and because of various reasons I know you. Talis and Sugandh talk about you. Sachin sent me the book and hopefully Sachin will help me write my book this year, hopefully. Really it's a lovely cover. I want to ask you, a lot of senior executives who are my friends, CEOs, CXOs, say we don't find time to write a book. And I'm a great example. I had my first idea, I think I discussed with him 6-7 years back and has never got down to writing it. And this year I'm determined to write it. What is your advice to CXOs who are very busy, how to write a book?
The answer lies in what Shiv mentioned some time ago. All you need is, if you have 16 hours, remove the distractions in your life and you'll make space for some time. But the whole thing starts with commitment. I committed that every Saturday and Sunday, I would spend 8 hours writing. It's a very simple commitment. All I did was get to a room, blast some old Mukesh, Rafi songs, listen to them, be inspired, and start writing. But it all starts with a promise. And if there is a deadline, for me, deadlines are important. I said, by the 31st of December, the book should be with Sachin. It was on the morning of the 31st. I sent it across to him and I said, Sachin, this book is in your hands. That's my promise. Made that. It starts with putting a deadline, putting a commitment. There are some days when you can't write. You get into a block. Never mind. But that 8 hours, you got to make up for it during the week, which is what I did.
And Mr. Nathan, because I know about your career, you went to Accelerize in the early 80s. This is the longest you stayed in a job, 19 years, almost 19.
That's right.
And you started with ICI and you did other gigs. So what has stayed you in Deloitte for so long? Have you become risk averse or what?
Okay.
Or you haven't been able to find a job?
Okay. So it's like this. I would never have left ICI at all. It's the best job I ever had in my life. And I told myself, and that company split. And I was being paid twice over for doing half the job. I just felt it was a wrong equation, so I left ICI. And then I bumbled through a few other organizations. And I said, I need an organization which is as good as ICI. Then I got into Deloitte. Deloitte is a fantastic place. It's one of the best organizations in the world. You may think I'm biased. Yes, I am. I've been here for a long time. As for distractions, you will have plenty. There'll be another organization, which has happened several times. Will come in and they'll say, I will give you. But are you willing to sell your soul for 30 pieces of silver? Ask yourself. If the answer is yes, then you change your job. If you're unhappy with the current, you do something about it. But if it is so bad, if the environment is toxic, then you have a problem. I don't suffer from that. By the way, I'm not risk averse. When I'm going to retire, I'm going to again, well, there's nothing called retiring. I've got to work till I drop. But I'll do certainly something else than what I'm doing right today.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
We'll wait and watch your career graph very, very closely ahead too. And we hope for a second book very soon, as you've been asked today already. And now we know the secret to his good writing is Rafi and Mukesh's songs for inspiration. What is your favorite song?
Well, that's a very, very, very tricky one. I also like Kishore Kumar. I also like S.D. Burman.
Ek do gaane?
There's one which is my favorite. Pukarlo. Well,
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us. Okay, I think we'll take one quick question and yes, you
Are
are.
you talking to your next employer? अगली जॉब के लिए पुकार लो के?
आपको लोग पुकार रहे हैं और आप हाँ ये कह रहे हैं खुद पुकार लो. Okay, we'll end with a quick question.
So my name is Manmeet, and the story that you've shared have been fascinating to hear. And might I compliment you by saying that you're not just a person who talks about humility, but also a very humble person yourself. Because I was asking for a pen when Mr. Shiv Kumar was outside, and you were the first person to offer it, even though I didn't ask you personally. So that goes to show how humble you are. And also, sir, you spoke about commitment. There's a word by James Clear, who's the author of Atomic Habits, who says implementation intention. He also talks about failure pre-mortem. Which is that you set yourself up and see what are the things that you can avoid doing so that you end up as a failure. So do you think that is also important?
I think all of us love to test waters. All of us like to test waters. Sometimes we just fall flat on our face. 19 years ago, I lost my job. When I say I lost my job, I quit on that job because I just felt that there was something happened, something. Forget what those things are. But it was on grounds of what I call as ethics. I just felt they were asking me to do something I didn't want to do. But that's out. For 69 days, I didn't have a job. I know the value of what it is to stay without a job. I know what it is to bring women back to work. I know what it is for people living those moments every day when children come up and ask, Papa, aaj office nahi gaye? So, the whole thing is not about failure in itself. It is good to fail, but it teaches you a lot. I learned to keep a diary and tell me what I'm really lousy at. And that diary is a fairly thick diary by now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Answer your question, since I know you a little bit. I spent a lot of time that day with you. First, why would you think of failure?
The point
No,
is
I read
failure.
the book, so I know what
Sure,
you're
sure.
talking about. I always
it is
think
to
whatever
avoid-
I'm doing, I'll succeed at.
Right, absolutely.
And I always, since it's a book forum,
Yeah.
there's a favorite author of mine. He's in heaven now. He's called Randolph Posh. The last lecture.
Right, the last.
There is nothing called a failure. It's an experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
A human being never fails. It's an experience. It's a project. The idea fails. The business fails. The person never fails. So one way to succeed is never think of failure and think of everything as an experience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, S.V. Nathan, for joining us for this special session. And thank you all for being a very engaging and lively audience.